Hi, this is Dr. Carol Billing from the University of Idaho, and I'm going to speak briefly about human development and learning, and this is Standard 2 in your teacher preparation program. What the focus of the standard is making sure that as you go into the classroom, you understand how students learn and develop, and that you're able to provide lots of different teaching strategies to support their growth intellectually, socially, and personally. So with all that being said, that's a pretty tough mark to hit. I think that as teachers we spend years figuring out how people learn and changing our teaching strategies to adapt to the different kinds of learners that we have in the classroom. I'm going to talk primarily on Kolb's learning styles and experiential learning cycle. It's based on, it's kind of like two layers, if you want to think about it. It's how you perceive and then how you learn. So when you say someone perceives something, they can have a feeling about it. You know, it's something they, it's more like something like a physical experience. And they can also think about a concept, which is an abstract conception. They also process by active experimenting, doing something, and then reflective or watching someone do something. And so if that's one layer in this theory, you take this layer here, which you're talking about something concrete experience, reflective, abstract, and active, and we're going to kind of layer that with how people learn. So I actually found a handout I think that is better, even better than this, and bear with me for a moment. We've talked about this: doing, having an experience, reviewing, reflecting, learning from the experience, and planning. These are sort of the steps in the learning cycle. And then there's learning styles. So these are distinct styles in how people learn, how they prefer to learn. And this is really, I think, one of the most fascinating parts of teaching, is that right here is the process of learning. The first four things we talked about on the outside of this diagram. And then on the inside, we're looking at how people like to learn. So some people want to feel it and do it. Some people want to feel it and watch it. Some people want to think about it and watch it. And other people want to think about it and do it first. I'm sure you know the person who, people who fit in each one of these boxes. If I come down here a little bit, I liked this table a lot. So if someone is active experimentation, and then in that paradigm with the concrete experience or feeling, they're in the more accommodating learning style. And if someone is reflective in that they want to watch as part of their process of learning, and then they want to think about it, that's more of the assimilating kind of a learning style. So if you think about it, you're doing and feeling person here and accommodating. This is probably somebody who maybe doesn't want to read the instructions, or maybe wants to just try it out. Well, I think it goes like this, and they start doing it. Whereas this person here, this is your thinker, right? So they want to see you do it. They're going to watch something on YouTube, and then they're going to think about what they watched on YouTube, and then they're going to try it. So when you're looking at a classroom of 20 kids or however many you have, you're going to have kids in all of these different boxes based on how they like to learn. And so this part of the article goes a little bit more in depth in the different kinds of students' learning styles. So I'm going to give you a link to this, and you can read it more because I don't want to keep you in the lecture. Obviously, I'm not going to read this to you, but this is kind of the really interesting part of teaching, is looking at your class and your students and trying to figure out, where they go. So this is another version of the same diagram with your learning on the outside and your your processing or your perceptions on the outside and your learning style on the inside. And then a lot of times I will take my student list, maybe the second week of school, and I'll look and see, like, who do I think is in this box and who do I think is over here. And I might even do, I tend to be more of a kinesthetic or tactile learner, so I will make popsicle sticks with the student's first name in each one of my classes. And then I would maybe print this out and put the popsicle sticks in each section based on which kind of learner I think they are. And then from that, I would start trying some groupings of students and who works well together. If I put one from each one of these boxes in a group, do they function well? I mean, certainly if you put everybody who's an activist together, you're going to have a hot mess, right? And if you have everyone who's a theorist together, you're not going to get them to get going. They've got to have an activist in there to get the wrench going, right? So anyway, this is something for you to think about as you head into teaching and you start looking and getting to know your students and figuring out how they learn best. Once you kind of have a feel for that, when you're creating your lessons, it gets a little bit easier because you know, okay, this, first period I've got a lot of theorists, so I need to give the information verbally first. They want to know all the details first. Fourth period is more of the activists. I need to get them moving. I need to do a 5-minute intro. Then I need to have them touch something and do something. And then I need to tell them more. And then I need to let them come back and touch and do. And then give them more information. So it's two very different learning styles. But I think it's one of the funnest parts of creating lesson plans and creating a classroom environment where people feel like that they're going to get a chance to learn in their preferred style. And obviously you can't do all of your lessons in accommodating, right? You've got to mix it up. So you can look at this list and sort of plan, even as concrete as plan your week, and say, I'm going to try to teach in this style a little bit more, and then this one the next day, and go down and see which one works best for your class or for your students. Learning modalities, I'm not sure where we're going with that one. Oh, okay, now I know what I'm doing. Sorry. This is not how I normally teach this. And to be honest, this content for this standard would be a whole semester because there's so much. There's this theory that I'm sharing with you. There's Gardner's multiple intelligences, which I'll give you a link for that. There's a book you could listen to, frameworks, and there is not Danielson's, but the other lady who has amazing lectures on classroom management. I'll put a link for that in my notes as well. But there's a lot here, so if I'm stumbling, I apologize. It's just there's a lot to teach someone about how to teach, and so it's a little bit hard to try to put it all in one video, but I digress. If the goal is to have your student a partner in the learning, you have to diversify your instruction, and you also have to get to know your students. One of the best tactics for doing that, I call it, is 3x5s, and it's 5x10s, excuse me, a 5x10. So when I would have a challenging student in class, I would spend no more than like 2 or 3 minutes, as much as 5 minutes of class in the beginning when everyone's coming in, they're getting settled. Maybe you have them do a bell work assignment or a question in their journal when they first come in, or you have them getting their gear out or whatever. You always have these little pockets of time. And so if I had a student I was trying to get to know, and whether it was a behavioral issue or was this a student who was really quiet and was hard to reach, I would, for 10 days straight, like 10 times that I saw him or her, make small talk with them. So I try to figure out something they're interested in. So I would have a student who's really interested in NASCAR. That was easy because I know a little bit about NASCAR and I like NASCAR. So I would just talk with him a little bit about, you know, something that was going on with NASCAR with the driver or something like that. And I would have it researched before I knew, you know. So I was like, okay, you know, Josh is coming in today. I'm going to say something about NASCAR. So I go to NASCAR news real quick and I'd look at the news real quick, and or if I had watched the race that weekend, you know, we just have a short conversation. And what I found is from day 1 to day 10, that student was almost a completely different student because they felt like they had a connection with you. And I mean, they did, because you had more knowledge about what makes them tick, what are they interested in, what motivates them. And that's all part of figuring out how to customize learning for your students. And I realize you might have 6 classes and 30 kids a class, and you're like, that's crazy, I can't do that. But you don't try to do all of them. You just pick out the ones you're not reaching naturally, the ones that are quiet, the ones that are frustrated. Any time a student has bad behavior in a classroom, there's always an underlying frustration. And I think once I figured that out as a teacher, that was like the best information my mentor teacher gave me, was every poor behavior is manifested from a frustration. And so sometimes just having these small conversations, you pick up on stuff, you learn stuff about the student, and you can start to figure out, like, what is the frustration? Why is the behavior happening? That's a behavior you need to change in order to have your classroom be more higher functioning. So those, you know, a couple of minutes for 10 days in a row, 10 meetings if you're on a block or whatever, can help you understand a student, understand what motivates them. Then you take that and you look at this theory, this Kolb's theory, or you look at the Gardner's multiple intelligences, or whatever theory you're working on in class, and you can start to design lessons that reach that student, or you can make the lesson for the whole class and then know that, you know, Joshua, I need to do this for Josh for him to be engaged. And so you do the whole lesson, and then you go to Josh and you're like, I want you to do yours a little bit different. Here's how I want you to do it. You know, and you modify it for that. But that's all about this, designing learning for your students and having them care about their students and have them be invested. And so you do that, number one, by knowing your students, modifying your lesson plans, and creating value in your lesson plans for your students as much as possible. So anytime I'm working on getting ready to teach K through 12 environment, I will try to think about how whatever I'm teaching is something that the student has experienced, or something the student's going to care about. So a good example is, I would teach business class in high school, and I needed to teach them Excel. So I needed to teach them the basics of how to navigate and function in Excel. So I had them do a budget. But what I did with the budget that I don't think is that much different than most people is I let them customize it. So I said, well, what kind of job do you think you're going to have? And what kind of house do you think you're going to live in? And what kind of car are you planning on driving? And they looked up those actual numbers, and they gave those actual numbers in their home budget. So they learned Excel. They learned how to budget. They got a reality check about whatever they think their life's going to be like. But they got to personalize it so it had value for them. And so that actually is down here in the bottom, simulating the real experience in that particular assignment. So let me show you real quick. This cone of learning is really interesting because there's a saying that's something like, show me and I'll retain 10%. Teach me, like hands-on, and it's like 50% or something higher. But if you have a student reteach a concept to another student, they tend to retain 90% of it. And this is sort of a good example of that. So verbal receiving, right? So this is auditory. I have a huge problem with this because if you have any kids with ADHD or ADD or lower executive functioning, and I should probably try to link something on executive functioning and working memory, but a lot of times with ADHD kids, they have a low working memory. And when I was told that about my son, I was like, I don't even know what working memory, what is working memory. And it's verbal, it's lots of things, but one of the key things is that you can't give them 5 verbal instructions. They don't retain it. And so I've seen that in the classroom, and I figured out fairly quickly that if I gave more than 3 instructions to some of my students, they couldn't retain they couldn't remember what to do. And they became overwhelmed, then they became anxious, and then became frustrated, and then we had a behavior, or we just had a kid who shut down. So I like the code of learning and that it has the verbal at the top, because, and this is the part that's ironic, is most teachers teach, right? They stand up, sage on the stage, and they talk to you, kind of like I'm talking to you now, which is not an awesome way to teach, especially if you have the option to do it a different way. Here it's a little bit rough because I'm working in an asynchronous environment, but in the classroom you have lots of different ways to teach. All down here. So passive is your verbal and your visual. Verbal being the least retained. So reading, hearing words, looking at pictures. Visual is a little bit higher because then students can start to take the pictures that they're seeing and align it to a past experience or align it to something that interests them in the future. So then down here in the 50% range, seeing it done on location, watching a demonstration. Participating in discussion, giving a talk, that's a little bit more retention because they're having to receive the information and then synthesize it and give it out. And then down here in the 90, doing a dramatic presentation, simulation, and simulating the real experience or doing the real thing. I would also add in here teaching another student. And not all students have the personality to do that. But if you ever get a kid who struggles, who does like to teach, who feels like sense of self-worth, whenever you pair them with another student to have them teach what they've learned, you're going to get great results from that student, the student that wants to teach, that feels self-worth by teaching others. They're going to retain and know your content better than anyone else. So anytime you can get further down here on the cone, closer into the doing section, your students are going to retain more of what you're actually teaching. And having you all coming from different CTE disciplines, it's difficult to say what that would look like in this video, so I'm not going to go through each kind of CTE and how that would look, but that's kind of what you want to keep in mind as you're creating your lesson plans. Okay, and that's about it. I think if I have any parting words of advice, it's to create those relationships with your students. Make it, learn all their names. I used to play a game where I would line the students, or I'd have the students sit, and I did this all through teaching community college and high school, or any face-to-face teaching I did. I'd have the kids sit in the classroom, and I would start at one end of the room with the first kid, and that was Amy, right? So Amy, and then the next kid, Josh, okay? Amy, Josh. Next kid is Luke. Amy, Josh, Luke. And I would do that. It took about 20 minutes. I would go through the entire class. So at the very end, I would literally say every kid's name in the class. And I will tell you, every time I started to do this, I thought, oh, today's going to be the day I can't get this, like I'm going to fail. But I didn't. And I did it for years. And I did it for so many classes. And when you do that, I called it the name game. Whenever you do that on the first or second day of class, I usually try to do it the first day of class, you will retain, as a teacher, you'll retain, I think, 70% of the kids' names. So I play the name game, and then because I like to be successful, set myself up for success, I did have them create a name card, and that name card went on their desk. But, if you see kids every day, every other day, in a traditional format, it's not hard to get the names down pretty quickly. So if I was a principal with a new teacher or a mentor for a new teacher, I would say, number one, learn their names, then start learning their different learning styles, so you can modify your lessons to really pull them in and get them to put some skin in the game. What matters to them? How can you make the lessons matter to them. And then number 3, start getting out of their way, because they're going to learn quickly, and your job is not to lecture but to teach, and then get out of the way and let them learn and let them fail, and hopefully not too badly, and not not especially with CTE, no physical damage, but yeah, just kind of keep that in mind. I think the less you make it about you and the more you make it about them and them setting their goals and them reaching their goals, the happier you're all going to be. And if I was ever teaching and I was bored, I knew my students were 3 times as bored. So if you're ever teaching and you're like, I hate this topic, I wish I didn't have to teach about this, you have to figure out a way to make it even interesting for you, so that otherwise you're going to lose them and they're going to be just as bored. So I used to have to teach, I had this one lecture or week of class of lessons that was on socialization, and I just thought it was so boring, and so I turned it into a skit. So I would teach a little bit about the different parts of the content, and then I had a really fun project where the students worked together in a group to make a skit to illustrate that they understood the concept I was trying to teach. So that's what you have to do. You have to go, I'm bored, so I need to make this interesting. Let's go outside the box, start looking for a different way to teach it so it is interesting. All right. With all that said and done, I will give you my email. I'm more than happy to take any questions anytime. I'm more than happy to come out, watch you teach, and give you some ideas. I know going into this next year, we don't know what if you're teaching face-to-face or not. I'm also happy to pop into a Zoom and try to help you with that as well. I know it's a different environment, and CTE on high school online is for sure stepping out of the box. But I also think I've gotten a lot of my pre-service teachers. I require them all to make some online lessons. I always have, because I feel like you could always flip the classroom a little bit, and I want to make sure they have the skills to do that. So I've seen a lot of really great videos, even something about I've had teachers cooking in their kitchen and showing me how to do knife skills. I've had teachers demonstrating different tools in their backyard, showing different tools and explaining how to use them. So it can be done, but I certainly understand there's lots of challenges. But I'm happy to brainstorm ideas with you. I need to, hey Carol, I need to teach this. Do you have any ideas for how to do that online? I'm not saying I'm going to have all these great ideas, but I'm definitely open to like bouncing ideas off each other. And if I am not really good at it, I can find somebody who's done it, because there are people who teach CTE online. We just have to cultivate these relationships and find some of these people that are already doing what you want to do. All right. Thanks very much. I appreciate your time.